We want to now talk about something a little bit, just a little bit bleak. This one's a little bit bleak. It's a little bit touchy, sad. It's a heavy one. But a lot of research has come through, and it's coming through mainstream places. I was just given an article written by a top scientist who happens to be a gay man. And he was involved in a lot of studies talking about all the chemicals on the planet. The chemicals mostly dumped from drug companies, but all the chemicals on the planet that are mostly in our water supply that are affecting the growth of creatures throughout the world. That the hormone levels, not only in humans, but the hormone levels in jungle animals, the hormone levels in birds around the ocean, aquatic animals, is being looped out. It's being thrown into a vicious loop. They're finding hordes of actually lesbian seagulls, like birds that are exhibiting behavior they never saw. They're finding hermaphroditic fish washing up all over the shore. They're studying different levels of chemicals secreted in men and finding in certain spots throughout the world and the country that these chemical levels are way out of balance and are mirroring those of a woman. So that the entire hormonal structure of a whole bunch of creatures, including humans, is being thrown off by our own toxicity, our own chemical dumping, our own pollution. And the fear that a lot of mammals and a lot of organisms, from humans on down, are not going to be able to procreate because the level of hormone balance is being thrown way off by a lot of the toxicity being found in the water that's being put into the food, and that's basically just permeating our entire life. And this is a major problem for scientists because they're looking at animals and they're seeing the effects this has on the balance in the rainforest. And it really speaks to a need for the human race to get more agrarian, to realize that it can't treat the earth like a plaything, and to realize that while technology and all the drugs research we have and all the technology and the machinery and everything else, while it may have a benefit in the short term, the long-term effect of it can be quite detrimental. And it's interesting because so many people look at the progress the world's had in, the technological era of the 90s and this decade, but no one wants to look at long-term effect. And I like to compare it to the use of medical steroids. We may have mentioned this. I don't know if we ever did this. When I taught grammar school, I remember I had a day in the summer. It was the end of the school year. And one of the kids, I remember his name, which I'm going to withhold, but he got bitten by a bee. It was either a bee or poison ivy. I forget what it was. But he had an allergic response, and his face blew up the color of a stop sign, twice its size. You could not see his eyes. They were slits. His mouth was a slit. It is the scariest thing I have ever seen happen literally in 10 minutes. They rushed the kid to the emergency room. He was back in the classroom at 3 o'clock to get his books, and his head was normal. They shot him full of steroids, medical steroids. Now, the kid needed it in that moment. It was an emergency. It seemed miraculous. Wow. In 2 or 3 hours, the steroids turned this kid normal again. So in the short term, it's a beautiful thing. But the long-term effect of steroids is extremely detrimental to the body. There's an insidious effect on bone density, on the liver. Now in this case, he only did it once. But let's say, wow, that's cool. The steroids got rid of a swollen face. The steroids got rid of an ankle pain. Or the steroids let me talk to my uncle in Kalamazoo. Or the steroids let me send a quick message to somebody in Detroit, Michigan. So the short-term gain of something is kind of overtaking the long-term damage. So just like medical steroids can perform miracles in the moment, it's pretty insane what they can do for injuries and whatnot. Or you look at athletes, what they do with steroids. But the long-term effect on the body is extremely detrimental. So it is with technology and drug advancement and all this communications media advancement we have. Yes, it makes life more convenient and more fun. And ironically enough, here we are using it right now to do this shtick. But in the long term, the effect on the planet, the effect on the spirit, the effect on the physical body is extremely detrimental and destructive. And we're beginning to see that now. Jacques Cousteau, the great, what would we call Jacques Cousteau? He was an aquanaut, I guess, for want of another term. His grandson discovered a gigantic bunch of waste in a I forget where it was in the water someplace, like a toxic dumping ground. There was a lump of plastic bigger than the state of Texas. Did you know this? He discovered in the ocean, at the depths of the ocean. I forget where it was. Bigger than the state of Texas. Now, as this stuff gets into the water and permeates the water, we don't even want to know the effects this will have on the planet. So, this is the kind of thing we talk about when we make the analogy with medical steroids. Yes, it seems miraculous and fun in the moment, but in the long term, extremely detrimental. So, when we get into our life here, I truly hope that as people cleanse and as people get into a higher space, there's a lot of recognition around proper conduct and preservation of the planet. A lot of recognition that all of us are part of the divine being, along with the trees, the plants, the goldfish, much like Shintoism speaks about. And in that enlightenment, there will be kind of a return to an agrarian age. A return to when life is a little more simple and a little more based on living with the land as opposed to abusing the land. So that's more of a philosophical discussion today. Hopefully we will see you again in the near future. Be well. Thank you, Yoshi.